Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. This is going to be a meandering chit chat. It is September 4th of 2025. Recently there have been threats by President Donald Trump that the military will be coming to Chicago. Governor Pritzker, governor of Illinois, Pritzker, with a host of Illinois politicians, spoke forcefully against that plan, told Trump that he is not welcome here, his federal forces are not welcome here. And so far, Trump seems to have been scared off. Of course, the court in California ruled against his deployment there in the city of Los Angeles. But it is hard to see this regime putting the permanent brakes on the plan as they find themselves in sort of a corner, I think, as far as their available options toward achieving their goals. And it is easy to assume that at some point they will come. Now, I hope that the fear wins out, and I would hope that the regime crumbles before. But whether they come or not, you will, of course, have the benefit of hindsight, which we here lack living in the moment. But one of the podcasters that I follow, a YouTuber that I follow, the channel is called Hawk Podcasts, whose work I drew on for my book Against Fascism. He has talked about the times we are living in the United States of America as being highly traumatic, and I feel it. One might almost call it depression, the weight of the feelings. I am not inclined toward depression, but external factors have let me feel something akin to that once when I had a pretty terrible health crisis and so forth. But so I thought I would do a reading of some just excerpts from one of my favorite authors, Brooke, who has not seemed to write much in the last 15 years or so, which is a real disappointment to me. And as I was looking through the books, I mean, trying to find things, I have books. I came across so many books that I would like to read. For the last almost 4 years now, 3.5 plus, I have been devoting myself to becoming a better reader, and I've actually accomplished quite a lot as far as books that have been long-standing items on my TBR, my to-be-read pile. I have lots of books. My desires, my ambitions have gone in all directions. And in the last 3.5 plus years, I've made a lot of progress and feel real satisfied with it. But since writing that book Against Fascism, which it's been a few months now, my reading has fallen apart. I haven't given it up completely, but I just have not been able to do the dedicated effort that I had been doing. And I know a lot of people are feeling something akin to this. And so the thought occurred to me, and it's a thought that I know very well from other aspects of my life. The thought occurred to me that an awful lot about life is having to deal with failure. So I looked at all of these books which I would like to be able to read. I would at least like to be able to make progress toward. And at this stage, it seems like that will not be happening. The likelihood of that is very small. And it may be forever. I mean, I may wind up having to cancel this channel in terms of it being a booktube channel just because I give up the reading of books entirely. For me, to read books, I think I need a stable society, a society where you look forward to each day being kind of similar to the one before. And there's not all of this lurching around as we seem to be doing in our political situation. You know, in many of my older books, I used to put a thing of my works, books of poetry, but I draw your attention to all of my plays here. So, and the last play, Adipose Rex, it was the last play I did, and I am not sure. I would have to look somewhere to see what year it was written, but it was the odd sort of situation. Usually I do my plays in 2 acts, and I would write a play, then I would take a little bit of time off and let the thoughts percolate or germinate, and then I would write the second act. And in that case, I had a brief window of time in order to write a play, and I decided to do it. You need to have concentrated periods of time for that kind of work. But the time proved insufficient, and I wrote the first half of the play, and then I just put it aside. And it dealt with the theme of politics. And this was before the Trump presidency, before the contest between Trump and Clinton. And the next year came about, and I had a little bit of time, and I saw the direction that the politics were going, and I knew that the play that I had written, Adipose Rex, well, I had written half of it. Once the situation changed politically in this country, I would not be able to write the play. I would not be able to finish it. And I don't think at the time I knew exactly that we were going to wind up with a presidency of Donald Trump, and that large portions of the population would cast its vote in favor of dictatorship, fascism, authoritarianism. So I managed to finish that play under the wire. I really should have tried to figure out exactly when that was, but I have a chapbook, presidential something or other, which talks about that period. One thing that I really hadn't counted on, but one thing that happened was that proved to be my last play, the last that I would write, because I understood that the style of play that I wrote, which was comedy based on the pattern of Attic comedy or Aristophanic comedy, depended upon a population that was open to free speech and free discourse and the play of ideas. And that was closing down. And so I have not been able to write a play since. I have not been interested in writing a play since. And I have talked often about how I would have to invent a new form to be able to continue with playwriting. When I say invent a new form, I mean invent something for myself. I mean, it could just be some sort of slipping into a groove that some other dramatic forebear had carved out already, because none of an artist's invention is complete. I mean, it's mostly all assimilation, but so I realized not only has the situation destroyed my playwriting career, but it may well be destroying my reading career. And so there is a heavy disappointment that comes with that. People have endured far worse. I've been reading My Apprenticeship by Maxim Gorky, and the society in which he was raised, in which he grew up and found his own course, was not a stable one either. But I thought I would read a little bit from Brooke Allen. I mean, I've just been through all these books that I just may never get to. And I'll read, I have 5 of her books, and I will read from 4. The 5th one is a biography of Benazir Bhutto, which I have not read. I don't like biographies as a rule, but I bought because I like this author's writing. And so I'm going to just read some little excerpts because good writing is a consolation to me. So this one is titled Moral Minority. Moral minority is a bracing reminder that our founding fathers did not consider a candidate's alleged relationship to God to be a relevant qualification for leadership. God was not central to the founding, Allen shows. Hard-won wisdom about mankind was. Allen lucidly demolishes the fundamentalists' revisionist history of the Constitution as a religiously inspired project by letting its architects, Madison, Hamilton, Franklin, Washington, Adams, and Jefferson, speak for themselves in all their iconic, probing, and sometimes antic wit. Moral Minority is an elegant and riveting defense of the Enlightenment gifts of empiricism and reason that have brought Western civilization to unparalleled heights of prosperity, health, and freedom. Heather McDonald said that. This book is copyright 2006. It should be noted that all of those founding fathers, as she referred to them, except for John Adams, were owners of slaves. And I think going forward in this country, they have to be treated as such and primarily as such. The YouTube historian Tad Stromer posits that the country existed and expanded specifically for the perpetuation of the slavery system. So I think we have to do some heavy revising of our constitutional system So I'm just going to read a little bit from this. And I'm going to, in this first paragraph, I'm going to omit little things here and there, and compress a couple of sentences into one. Many American Christians who are distressed over what they see as the absence of God in our Constitution, ... have often chosen to justify the all too evident godlessness of the document by claiming that its framers were so godly, so thoroughly steeped in Christianity, that God was implicit in everything they did. There was no need for the founders to write about God and Christianity in the Constitution, since it was understood by all that a Christian God and a Christian agenda were an integral part of the project. But any perusal of the proceedings of the Constitutional Convention, ... shows that this was definitely not the case. The framers, as a group, saw religion as a divisive rather than a cohesive force, and appear to have decided that the less said about it, the better, so long as the concept of full religious freedom was made clear and enforceable. Thus, while the 1781 Articles of Confederation had acknowledged, quote, the great governor of the world, unquote, the Constitution acknowledged no supernatural authority at all, not even that vaguest of deist formulations, providence. I'll skip on ahead. At the Constitutional Convention, Madison actually proposed two clauses that were rejected by the Assembly. They were, first, that the civil rights of none shall be abridged on account of religious belief or worship, nor shall any national religion be established, nor shall the full and equal rights of conscience be in any manner or on any pretext infringed, and that no state shall violate the equal rights of conscience or the freedom of the press or the trial by jury in criminal cases. End quote. Had these measures passed, religious regulation would have been forbidden on the state level as well as the federal. As it stood, however, when the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were passed, including the First Amendment prohibiting the establishment of a national religion, most of the state constitutions still did not conform with these principles. The constitutions of 11 of the 13 states, that is, every state excluding New York and Virginia, retained established sects and religious tests. Madison, the greatest and most stubborn advocate of religious liberty among the Constitution's framers, enjoined the states to follow the example of the federal government and to hasten to revise and purify your systems and make the example of your country as pure and complete in what relates to the freedom of the mind and its allegiance to its maker, as in what belongs to the legitimate objects of political and civil institutions, end quote. This eventually happened, but not nearly as quickly as Madison, Hamilton, and the other proponents of religious freedom would have liked. Pennsylvania dropped its religious test laws in 1790, Delaware in 1792, Georgia and South Carolina soon afterward, but Vermont and New Jersey retained tests until 1844. Disestablishment on the state level proceeded slowly, especially in the Presbyterian and Congregational strongholds of New England. The Congregational Church was disestablished in New Hampshire in 1817, in Connecticut a year later, in Maine in 1820, and at long last in Massachusetts in 1833. The 14th Amendment of 1868, enacted in the wake of the tragically destructive Civil War, ruled that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. State laws were thus legally superseded by federal ones. Still, New Hampshire did not end religious tests until 1877, nor Maryland, amazingly enough, until 1961, when a Supreme Court ruling finally put an end to this relic of the bad old days. The 1797 Treaty of Tripoli illustrates the triumph, temporarily at least, of Madisonian separationism. In that year, the federal government concluded a treaty of peace and friendship between the United States of America and the Bey and subjects of Tripoli, or Barbary, now known simply as the Treaty of Tripoli. Article 2 of the treaty contains these words: quote, "As the government of the United States, ... is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion," italics mine, she italicized that, "as it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Mussulman, and as the said states never had entered into any war or act of hostility against any Mahometan nation, it is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries." The document, so let me just repeat the part that she highlighted. The United States, the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. So back to Brooke Allen. This document was endorsed by President John Adams and Secretary of State Thomas Pickering. It was then sent to the Senate for ratification. The vote was unanimous. It is worth pointing out that although this was the 339th time a recorded vote had been required by the Senate, it was only the third unanimous vote in the Senate's history. There is no record of debate or dissent. The text of the treaty was printed in full in the Philadelphia Gazette and in 2 New York papers, but there were no screams of outrage, as one might expect today. So that's a little bit of her talking about our skeptical founding fathers. She did a lot of, I think, reviewing, and she was often called upon to write introductions for, I don't know, maybe off-brand editions of classics, like, say, the Barnes & Noble classics, that kind of thing. I'm not sure, but one of her books is called Artistic License. Back in the day, I mean, I ordered it from somewhere and got this. I didn't know exactly what that was about. So let me just read a little bit from her introduction or preface. There's a lot of people in the hall, and that always gets them worked up. Anyone who studies or writes about major authors must sometimes be surprised at the dysfunctional and apparently destructive nature of great talent. The Western literary tradition, it seems, has been dominated by a sorry collection. The Western literary tradition, it seems, has been dominated by a sorry collection of alcoholics, compulsive gamblers, manic depressives, sexual predators, and various unfortunate combinations of 2, 3, or even all of the above. The occasional exception pops up. Jane Austen, for example, was a model citizen. But such birds are very rare, and only the habitual perversity of the pedagogue could have turned this rogues gallery of weirdos into the dim procession of canonical dead white males that now sends college students to sleep. Dante, the Christian synthesist, Pope, the high priest of neoclassicism, Eliot, the reverent holdout for tradition. Now the same folks that were in the hall have moved their laughter and giggling to the street below. When artists do uphold order and tradition, it is usually as a desperate device for keeping the... Come on, dude. When artists do uphold order and tradition, it is usually as a desperate device for keeping the chaos in their own minds and hearts at bay, and Eliot is, of course, the supreme example of this principle. I'll skip to the closing paragraphs of the preface. Writers' lives are not always particularly interesting. Knowledge of them does not necessarily add to one's enjoyment of the work. In some cases, though, such knowledge does enrich our understanding. To learn the tragic facts of Thackeray's life, for instance, is to be able to see beneath the brilliant comedy of Vanity Fair to its much sadder depths. To know about Bram Stoker's mutually parasitical friendship with the actor Henry Irving is to gain insight into Count Dracula's relations with his acolytes. The writers in this book would seem to have little in common. They prove, if such proof again be needed, that there is no such thing as an artistic temperament. There never has been. There are only artists, infinitely variable and fascinating. And if you want to know what's in the book, you can possibly, it's probably not that clear, but you can possibly screenshot that. This is from 2004. I think her books, I'm not sure about this one. The Criticism is published by the great Chicago publisher Ivan R.D., and so is Moral Minority, a great publishing house. So the next book, and her literary criticism is just wonderful. Sad to say, one does not find her anymore. This one is from 2003, so I guess it's a little bit before that. No. Again, preface. Writing of George Eliot, Virginia Woolf commented that, quote, "I think she is a highly feminine and attractive character, ... and I only wish she could have lived nowadays and so been saved all that nonsense. I mean, being so serious and digging up fossils and all the rest of it," end quote. Yes, possibly, but one could just as easily wish that Woolf herself had been spared the obsessions of her own time. Freud and significant form and doctrinaire pacifism and obligatory sexual frankness. Many of Eliot's and Woolf's interests and preoccupations may seem quaint and dated, unworthy in retrospect of their high artistic capacities, but they indicate a necessary vitality and engagement with the urgent intellectual and philosophical questions of their times. We are all formed by our times as well as our characters and circumstances, and an argument could be made that the most successful artists and the most successful human beings are those who participate avidly in the drama of their particular historical moment. No man, Tocqueville observed, can struggle with advantage against the spirit of his age. The measure of a writer's quality can only really be gauged after enough years have gone by for us to view his work outside the distorting mirror of his or her period. Many writers who are unconditionally praised today will be forgotten in half a century. Why, for example, do the Sherlock Holmes stories hold up, while countless other examples of the detective genre have become, over the decades, unreadable? Why does the fiction of Edith Wharton, which deals with an arcane code of mores that was dying even at the time she wrote, seem so perfectly applicable to our own world? So, just a little bit from the introduction to this book, 20th Century Attitudes. Excuse me. And I think Justin, the triumphal reader, is going to be reading this book. I tried to read it and couldn't get into it. It's a very short thing, but it would be very appropriate for Shorty September. So, she wrote sort of a travel log through Syria. And this came out almost the same week as the civil war started in Syria. The other side of the mirror, an American travels through Syria. So I'll read a little bit from from the first chapter. This is not a book about militant Islam or women and the veil, or terrorism, or the Arab-Israeli crisis, or any of the other subjects Americans have come to expect every time they pick up a volume on the Middle East. Instead, it will be an old-fashioned series of travelers' impressions, observations and thoughts about a country whose reality confounded all my preconceived notions and inspired me to seek out many historical and literary sources for enlightenment. It is simply my attempt to convey a bit of what makes Syria one of the most captivating countries I have ever visited, and certainly the most welcoming. I took my first trip to Syria in the spring of 2009 with my husband and 2 teenaged daughters. I returned there the following autumn with an old school friend, Catherine. Each visit was a revelation. Excuse me. For while Syria was not actually named by George W. Bush as part of the axis of evil, it might as well have been. Excuse me a second. Official American policy had ensured that it was linked in the popular imagination with our much-hyped enemies in the Middle East. The Bush administration had imposed a series of crippling economic sanctions against the country, and Syria was routinely portrayed in the American media as a scary police state with an old-style strong-arm leader. First, the longtime president Hafiz al-Assad, who ruled the country from 1970 until his death in 2000. and thereafter his son Bashar. Not that there were very many mentions of it at all. If the distant and mysterious nation did pop up in the pages of the New York Times, my hometown paper, it was usually in the sinister context of its existential opposition to Israel, its roles in the 1967 and 1973 Arab-Israeli wars, or its government's alleged support of international terrorism. Excuse me, my throat is acting up. No other aspect of Syrian life was presented, and from what I could glean from television and newspapers of every political stripe, and how else is one to judge, the country was principally populated with militant, bomb-hurling Islamists who hated America and aspired to develop a nuclear arsenal in order to pulverize Israel as quickly as possible. Excuse me. So, she talks a little bit about the people that she meets. So this is still from that first introductory chapter. Took me a while to find it. It actually is the end of that first part. As we walked, Saeed reached up and plucked branches of jasmine for me, crushing the blossoms in his fingers so I could get a richer waft of their fragrance. He spoke without bitterness about his dreams for a career and how unlikely it was that they would come true. We are all the family we have, so we must take care of each other, he said. My mother has done everything for us. We must care for her. These encounters led me to some profound rethinking, both about the country I was visiting and my own. What went wrong? Historian Bernard Lewis asked about the Islamic world in his recent book by that title, and the phrase has caught on. Some things have gone wrong there, unquestionably, but others seem, at least to my foreign eyes, to have gone right. Whether because of the prophet's enjoinder on the faithful to practice charity and hospitality, or because of some other cultural conditioning in that direction, Syrians seem to have developed a far more civil and polite public arena than our own. One might profitably transpose Lewis's question and ask, what went wrong with us, with America? For my trips east have made it clearer to me than ever before that something has gone very wrong. A cultural hardening that set in, I have come to believe, in the Reagan 80s, when greed suddenly became good. In the intervening quarter century, our country succumbed to a grim social Darwinist philosophy, according to which our neighbor is defined not as a fellow creature, but, if not exactly an enemy, then at least a potential competitor. One might have expected the resurgence of American Christianity over the same period to have mitigated this dog-eat-dog attitude, but too many of our Christian churches seem to have incorporated the philosophy of competition directly into their creeds. What do Christianity and Islam teach us about our duties to others? Christ urged us to sell all we have and give to the poor. An admirable goal, but not very realistic. How many people in history have actually followed these instructions? Muhammad, on the other hand, proposed an entire social system, a series of laws that anyone can realistically follow and still remain part of the larger social structure, and so forth. Well, I'll continue on with this. The Muslim zakah, an obligatory charity amounting to 2.5% of one's income, as distinct from private charity, also important, is eminently doable, That system seems to have instilled some respect for the humanity of the dispossessed, while our own social Darwinism seems only to have engendered contempt for them as pathetic losers. I was struck by the Syrians' shocked reaction to the healthcare debate going on back home at the time of my visit. They simply could not conceive of a system that let poor people fall through the cracks, that allowed someone to die unnecessarily if they couldn't pay for care. The whole thing made me think it quite probable that Islam is philosophically incompatible with the doctrinaire capitalism we have been trying to spread around the world. But then again, so is Christianity, real Christianity, that is, as I see it. American media coverage of the Middle East for the last 40 years or so, probably since the 1967 war, has engendered a knee-jerk prejudice that will be almost impossible to cure. To visit Syria is to confront the unhappy truth about our media, which is that much of the international news we read or see from whatever portion of the political spectrum serves not as a window looking out at the world, but as a mirror that reflects our own fears and obsessions and shines them right back at us. So, none of what I have just read you is comforting for our time today. I am hoping we can get through this period. But certainly not all of us will. I don't think that the Brooke Allen writing those words, the fact that we would have a regime which not only views people who cannot pay for their health care as losers, but actually has taken steps to cause deaths in the millions, ultimately, of poor people. So that doesn't get us anywhere, but I'll leave it off. Thank you for stopping by my channel. Oh, final word. In 10 days' time or something, I'm planning to do a question and answer video. If you have any questions, please let me know. It's an Ask Me Anything video. Just that doesn't guarantee that I'll answer, but I'll try to give an honest answer. Thank you very much for stopping by.